in honor of Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman in the United States to receive a medical degree. In remembrance, I'd like to welcome everyone to our annual Women in Academic Medicine Grand Rounds. I am honored to introduce our Women in Academic Medicine guest speaker, Dr. Sherine Gabriel. Dr. Gabriel earned a Doctor of Medicine degree with distinction from the University of Saskatchewan, Canada, and completed her IM residency and rheumatology fellowship at the Mayo Graduate School of Medicine. Dr. Gabriel is the Dean Emerita of Mayo Medical School, past president of the American College of Rheumatology, and currently professor and dean of the Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. Dr. Gabriel has had a career-long commitment to education and career development. Her research, which is largely NIH funded, has resulted in over 250 original scientific publications. In 2011, Dr. Gabriel was appointed by the U.S. government to become the first chair of the Methodology Committee of the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gabriel.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Anne, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for being so gracious during my visit. I've met with many of you, and I look forward to meeting with others. When Dr. Glassberg asked me to do this, I was, of course, honored because it's especially because it's the University of Miami and because it's a Women in Medicine session. But I have to say, as a woman and as a Midwesterner, the notion of kind of talking about myself is tough. So it's tougher than talking about my science. So I hope this hits the mark for all of you. So my professional journey in academic medicine, and this is what I will try to cover, some of the things that you already heard, maybe in a little bit more detail. And just to warn everybody, I'm going to try to make it my prepared comments fairly brief, because what I really hope is that some of these comments generate questions or comments from all of you, and we can engage in a bit of discussion the last few minutes. So I'll start from the beginning, kind of go over that, and talk about my education. I put leadership and learning together because I think the more opportunities you have to serve in leadership roles, variety of leadership roles, and that's where many of the learning opportunities I've had are. And I'm kind of going to end with what I see are ingredients for success, at least from my perspective. So just to have a little bit of fun and to start at the very beginning, this is where it all started. So this is me. And I'm Egyptian, so I was born in Cairo, Egypt, and the bottom there. Now I forgot to ask where the pointer is. I guess is there a pointer on this thing? No, it doesn't matter. But at the very bottom here, we have a pointer. Is my school. You don't. It's not the. Yes. Oh. Okay. Right there, and so that's kind of a fun way to start. Is it Anne or Anna? Anne mentioned I grew up and I went to school actually in Saskatchewan. I know you didn't pronounce that quite right, but I forgive you. It's a tough one. But anyway, I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan. All of you who complain about winter in Miami, like last Sunday was so horrible, this is winter. And we have beaches kind of just like the beaches you have here. You know, this is a lake in Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan is the home of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and it's located right about there. So my education is you know, because we were, my brother and I were, you know, kids of immigrants. We didn't really understand things so well here, and it didn't even occur to me to go outside my province for education. So I went to the University of Regina and the University of Saskatchewan for medical school, and then I got a little bit smarter and headed east to go to McMaster University for my epidemiology training, and then really all of my other education and the rest of my career pretty much all took place at the Mayo Clinic, mostly in Rochester, Minnesota, but other areas of Mayo as well. This is what you've heard about pretty much already. Got my medical degree from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, and then shortly after that I pursued internal medicine residency and rheumatology fellowship in Rochester, Minnesota. So it was, you know, kind of due south. not far south. I thought I was going south and getting away from winter to get to Minnesota from Saskatchewan. And then during medical school, even it became clear to me that I wanted to pursue more than a purely clinical career. And I wanted, and to do that, I knew that I needed to be educated in at least research methods or in research methods. So I went back to Canada, and this was actually, was able to negotiate something called a Mayo Foundation scholarship at the end of near the end of my training at Mayo, which is reserved for, you guys may have something similar, it's reserved for individuals in training, nearing the end of their training, that you want to keep on staff, but where they want or you want them to go for some additional training and bring it back. And so Mayo sent me back to Canada to pursue this Master of Science in Clinical Epidemiology. And as I'll show you a little bit later, the reason I had to go away for this training is that we didn't have any clinical research training at Mayo. And years later, I actually created an opportunity for people, for young folks who wanted that same training to get it right at Mayo. So it was sort of a give back sort of thing. And of course, American Board in Internal Medicine Rheumatology. The other piece that I'll talk about also a little later, and again, I'm hoping you think of questions along the way, is I also began to become interested in the business of medicine. And so I created opportunities for myself, and this was through another Mayo scholarship, actually. It was called the Macmillan Management Scholar Award, to get some training in business. And so I went to multiple sessions at Wharton and at Kellogg. And this particular award is something we have at Mayo, and again, you may have something similar, for junior faculty who have an interest and maybe an aptitude in the business side of medicine, or maybe health policy as it applies to managing a medical institution. And it provides funding for those individuals to go and get additional training. And so that's why I've highlighted those things. And of course, that was instrumental in helping me figure out what to do next. And so more fun here. I don't know if this works, but that's like me in the corner there. And I think that the dress is the most, the way people are dressed, I think, is the most fun here of the slide. But I keep in touch with only a handful of these individuals anymore, it's just really too bad. I'm one of very few of them who actually left the country. So leadership and learning. And what do I mean by that? You've already heard, about my research program. When I went away to do my epidemiology training, it was because I knew I wanted to develop a research program, epidemiology research program, and I knew I needed some additional tools in order to do that. And Mayo, where I had been offered a job right out of my fellowship, or after my fellowship ended, didn't have that kind of training. So that's why I went up to McMaster to get my degree in epidemiology. But I knew I wanted to do this, and I also knew that if I started at Mayo as a full-time clinician and then began to think about how to build a research program sort of on day one of being a clinician, it would be very, very difficult, because I would have, a full clinical slate, and it would be very difficult to have the protected time to really to think about what I wanted to do, to collect preliminary data, to write, to do some preliminary research. So my strategy was to try and get that protected time in place before I even had day one of work. So during my training program, I started writing grants, small grants, that would take effect when I started at Mayo. And so that helped me, because it was critical for me, understanding the way the Mayo system works and the clinical practice demands on individuals who'd be full-time clinical practice, that I needed that protected time right off the bat. So that was really important. I was able to do a lot of stuff and get a lot of things published over the years, and I guess the only comment there, and I mentioned it earlier in one of my meetings, is that early in my career, I was really focused on developing that research program and getting the publications out and getting the funding in, and not very much on anything else. And that helped me because I wasn't distracted by administrative stuff, which I can say I'm very much distracted by now. And I really didn't travel very much for a whole lot of reasons. First of all, I was focused on the work. And second of all, at that time, that's when my husband and I had small kids, and so neither of us traveled very much. So it was really a focus on this. And then I've listed some of the things that I did and got along the way, and I'm very excited to be editor of our textbook, or co-editor of our textbook now as well. So these are just again, it wasn't clear to me exactly what to do, but just some of the papers I've published a whole bunch, but just because they signify some of the areas of research. So early on, and this was part of my thesis work for my master's degree at McMaster, I was very interested in the gastrointestinal risks associated with NSAIDs. This is old stuff. This is 1991. And then probably what I was maybe infamous for, if not famous for, is I did the first large case-controlled study that demonstrated that silicone-containing breast implants are not associated with connective tissue disorders, and that was published in the New England Journal in '94. I was pretty young. I was a pretty young investigator, a pretty young physician investigator at that time, and it was an entirely new experience. And so I had lawyers. I mean, I was, threatened suits almost every week. It got so bad that Mayo actually assigned a lawyer to sort of manage me and my issues for a year and a half until it kind of quieted down. I was invited to speak before Congress a couple of times, and it was just a very interesting, sometimes stressful, but it was an incredible learning experience. How you manage research that can be so controversial. And then just other stuff. I've done a lot on the epidemiology of rheumatoid arthritis that you've probably seen, in particular cardiovascular risks associated with rheumatoid arthritis, but also other risks like infections and so on. So those are just kind of some of the examples that reflect the work. I've always had a very broad interest in medicine, and I think that's important for anybody aspiring to be a leader, in any capacity. And so I got very interested in education. I told you early on I went to McMaster to get a degree in clinical epidemiology and biostatistics because there wasn't such an education at Mayo. So I thought when I come back, I'm going to work to see if I can create that for other people. And so these are just some of the things that happened to me with respect to education over the years. So I did create that program, and that's why I got this Distinguished Educator Award at Mayo, because I created something that there was a need for, and it's still ongoing, and it's still ongoing, and created the program initially. And it was about the same time as NIH was recognizing that nationally there was a need for clinical research training in the country, that clinical research is happening, and a lot of the times sometimes it's better than others, and the reason it was so uneven is because there isn't training. And so some of you may remember there was the NIH K30 awards, and then there was the NIH CTSAs, of course. But because I had already started developing this program at Mayo, we were very well positioned when the CTSA announcements first came out, and we were funded the very first cycle, and my role in that was to be a co-PI and director of education for our NIH-funded CTSA, and I was able to, while I was there, renew it once, and I'll just have to gloat, but they tried to renew it after I left, and they had a little bit of a hard time, but they got it back. But it was really nice because we had something ready to go when the funding mechanism came around. Another education activity that was very important to me was this new AMA award that came out, Accelerating Change in Medical Education, and I don't remember if you guys are on the list of those who got one or not, but as Dean of Mayo Medical School, it became clear to me that the way medicine is transforming, the pace at which medicine is transforming was so rapid that medical education had to catch up. So we had to train people to be ready for the medicine of tomorrow, not of today, and certainly not of yesterday. So that meant some changes to our curriculum that introduced topics like, health policy and health law and business leadership and all of the things that leaders in medicine today are faced with, but none of us were really taught in school. Had to kind of figure it out and learn it on our own. And so this Accelerating Change in Medical Education Award that the AMA put out was all about that. And our proposal was called Introducing the Science of Healthcare Delivery into Medical Education, and that's what we've tried to do. That's what we tried to do at Mayo. So our graduates will be graduating with, of course, the MD and a certificate in the science of healthcare delivery. If they wanted to do more work, they could get a master's degree. And it's a very, other medical schools have done similar things, particularly Dartmouth. They also have, I think they call it healthcare delivery sciences there, and you also get that training. And so we actually compared and contrasted a little bit to see how they were approaching it and how we were approaching it, and then other schools are doing similar things. When I became dean at this school, I introduced, with the help of one of my senior education leaders, introduced similar sorts of training here. And so these are just some of the things I've done within education and how my own experiences informed that. As I said, I think in the introduction, leadership is a path for learning. Every leadership role is an incredible learning opportunities, and there are a lot of them. I had the opportunity to chair the Department of Health Sciences Research, which was the largest, at the time, research department at that institution. I had an opportunity to serve on the executive board. And I also had multiple, and it's just, if the opportunity doesn't come looking for you, you have to go looking for the opportunity. I really wanted to learn more about what I call the business side of the house. And so I at one point, I think I chaired the marketing committee, and for a long period of time, I was medical director for strategic alliances and business development at Mayo. And so that's all the business relationship that Mayo has outside of its walls, kind of pursuing those, participating in the negotiation and moving them forward. Now, one of the reasons I kind of joke, one of the reasons I thought I was qualified for this is that strategic alliances, kind of like NIH grants, you're lucky if 1 in 10 hit. And it's the same for these grants. But it was an incredible learning opportunity. I'll maybe stop and make one additional comment about all of these, because you probably look at this and think, well, what do I know about business development or marketing? But at that institution, at Mayo, every single leadership role is a dyad. So there's a physician leader and a senior professional manager. And so you're always paired up with somebody who is an administrator or, in this case, a senior business leader. And I learned a great deal from those experiences. And then I was dean there before I left. Also, there are incredible opportunities out there for extramural leadership, particularly in your professional organizations. And so, I'm a rheumatologist, so mine was the American College of Rheumatology. Certainly not as big as I think some of your organizations, but they're always looking for volunteers, right? And so you see what you see. I participated in the research committee, the education committee, quality of care, some other things. And eventually, I became the president of the American College of Rheumatology, which is a tremendous honor. There's a long story about that I can, that maybe will come up in the question period. But again, these organizations are always looking for help, and it's a way to sort of test the waters to see if you're interested in doing more and if it's the kind of leadership or experience that could help you in your career just as you're helping your own professional organization. Other extramural leadership roles. This was the coolest, even though it'll likely disappear sometime soon. But when the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which is called out in the Affordable Care Statute, so there are several pages of that statute that say we will create this institute, and I got a call from the United States Government Accountability Office to see if I would be willing to be vetted. Now, that was really extreme vetting. I've never been vetted like this, actually, for any role I've ever had. It was very interesting. I mean, they wanted to know if I smoked pot in college. They wanted to know anything that could come to light that would embarrass them. Luckily, I've been kind of boring. But anyway, so that was really an exciting opportunity. So it was called out in the Affordable Care Act, and then they went through this process of selecting individuals according to the specifications in the statute. But all we really had, some of us knew one another, but few really did. So there was this group of people from around the country that were thrown together with a few pages of a statute and some money in the bank, and that was it. Go create an institute. And here are the specifications. So that was very exciting. Again, at one of the meetings this morning, we talked about, how creating something new is often more fun than, keeping something exciting on the tracks. But so that was kind of fun. And like many of you, NIH is always calling, right? So study section service is a great way to learn, obviously, about your research area. I did that for many years, and I just finished a stint on council, NIH, NIAMS council, the council that has funded me, and then some work with FDA, including chairing an FDA committee at one point. So just to sort of try to bring it together, what do I think, or as I reflect on all those experiences, were the key ingredients that I think are important from my perspective. This seems a little bit out of place, so bear with me a bit. The top line says, understanding the context in which you live. It's very easy to focus on your research or focus on your education or focus on your practice and not really look more broadly. And I'm a real believer in not only broad experiences, but pushing yourself to look beyond your little piece of medicine into the broader context. And, I've just got a couple of slides here to remind us all of that broad context. So the aging of the world population, today and in 2025, and blue is, percent over 60, right? We all know about that. And also, this is cost of care, right? And the U.S. is in red, and you've got other developed worlds in the other colors and in the later ages. And there's just no question that the cost of care here is way out of kilter with elsewhere in the developed world. And we've all seen, I could show you, I've got half a talk on this, of how we're just out of sync with the rest of the Western world. And that does not mean that people in our country live longer or have better quality of life. It's just the contrary, actually. So that all leads to this, which is the value equation that we're all in healthcare management anyway struggling with. So how do we maintain or improve quality of care how do we improve quality of care, I'll say, while maintaining or decreasing costs? And it's very clear, I think, to all of us in this room that the costs of care are not sustainable, that the pattern of healthcare delivery that we're all engaged in and have been engaged in is not the way of the future. And we're all engaged in a transformation, an exercise where we're trying to figure out, how do we do this better? How do we take care of people, improve the quality? I was going to say as well as, but I think there are so many needs. We've got to improve the quality of care, and by outcomes here, I have also included patient satisfaction. So how do we improve what we do and do it for less in order to keep moving forward? It's an enormous challenge. One of the ways that's happening, and I've got some of the clippings here of the merger mania that's going on in the state where I live, in New Jersey, trying to reinvent delivery systems, redesign delivery systems, integrate so that the delivery systems are more efficient. And it's going on everywhere. Some of that is going on here. I've mentioned to many of you that one of the reasons I took this particular role is to be part of this at the ground level and really learn from it and understand how it all can work. And we're still in the middle of it. And then even at another level, understanding the healthcare context means, where is science going? And this is just a quote from our past president, who I miss already. You can match a blood transfusion to a blood type. This was an important discovery, he said, in January 2015, and then he talks about matching cancer cure to our genetic code and figuring out the right dose of medicine based on a person's genetic code. So again, it's really important to think, okay, I'm all about cardiovascular risk and rheumatoid arthritis, but to sort of pull yourself out of your focus area to understand the healthcare context. So I think that is a key ingredient for success. And then telemedicine. I've mentioned to a bunch of you that this is my, full disclosure here, that my husband's CEO of a small telemedicine company, but it's very clear just talking to him and the meetings that are happening, that he's engaged in, that this is going to be a big part of healthcare delivery, how healthcare delivery is being transformed in the future, well, how it works and how it fits in, and how we can leverage it to do more for our patients. That's all still to be determined. Another key ingredient to success, in my point of view, is mentoring and mentors and advisors. And I'm of the opinion that you never stop needing mentors and advisors. And so, this is, I've just started, these are just a few of them, but this is Claire Bombardier, who was my one of my thesis mentors. I guess she and Peter Tugwell also were. Those of us who are rheumatologists know those names. But I've had lots of mentors along the way. And do any of you know Arthur Rubinstein? Yeah. Sorry. I mean, come on, right? So I consider him my mentor today. So he's somebody that I talk to a lot about, being a dean, and he knows a little bit about my environment, and I try and talk to him as much as I can. So my point here is, this is Dr. Meenan, who's a rheumatologist who went on to become Dean of Public Health at BU, and Audrey Nelson, and a rheumatologist at Mayo, and Joe Melton, a leading epidemiologist, not rheumatologist elsewhere. So I could have put others there, but I don't believe there's ever a time where you stop needing a mentor or an advisor, at least somebody to bounce ideas off of. And I've got like the best of the best, I think, right now. Not that he's better than any of these folks, but he's fabulous. These are some of the students. Actually, these are research fellows in my clinical research program that I created at Mayo. And just as a reminder that I have always learned as much from my students, I think, and other learners as they have from me. And so look for opportunities for your students to teach you things or to learn things from your students. This is just a picture of the medical students, the last medical student group at Mayo before I left. Oops. And then I've got some other fun things that, ingredients for success. This is my husband. He grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and they're business people. I learned some of my business skills from them, and I have two sons. One of whom I'm really, really trying to get him to marry this beautiful young woman, but he just isn't quite ready. And I'm really pushy. I think she's too good for him. He's got to go for it. But and my parents. So I think again, we're all rooted in something. Most of us are rooted in our families, and without a supportive family, I don't think I could have done much of it. This is my team at Mayo before I left, and this is my medical school kind of executive team there. And then this is where I work now. And see, it's the East Coast. We have these things called galas, I'm learning. I've never heard of, I really didn't know what a gala was. In the Midwest, we don't have galas. So this is the CEO of the hospital at our first gala. And, I had to get fancy. And you probably know this guy, too. This is Brian Strom. He used to be at Penn. He took the job at Rutgers as chancellor, and he's the one who recruited me. And this is, I think, on our first white coat ceremony day. For any of you who may know him, he's always laughing and telling jokes, and so that's what that is. So just final thoughts. Again, I'm a real believer in broad and varied experiences. If you're really looking to serve in any kind of a leadership role, and so I talked to you about, my focus on research and my focus on education. Obviously, my focus on clinical practice throughout, as much as I could do that, but also learning about, business, getting exposed to as many intramural and extramural leadership opportunities as I could in order to build that broad perspective and also a broad network of people to talk to. Learning, you just can't stop doing that from your students, from colleagues, and from mentors. That can never ever stop. And then the usual ingredients. You've got to be passionate about what you're doing, and when you're passionate about what you're doing, you're much more able to develop a vision for the future and where it could go and move it forward with drive and creativity, and nurture the things that nurture you. So the folks who support you at work and the folks who support you at home. So I think those are my final thoughts, and I hope you did what I asked to think about questions, because we left some time for that. Oh, I do have one pretty slide here. So this is I have a place right over here. I can almost see it from there. So this is you guys live in one of my favorite places to escape from all of my stress. So it's wonderful to be here.
So thank you for a most inspirational and informative Grand Rounds. We appreciate it. Maybe I could start by asking you, one of the things that you said at the very beginning, which sort of caught my attention, and you emphasized it later on, is the fact that you sort of have to make the opportunities for yourself.
Right.
And so as you make the opportunities, obviously as a woman who has a family and a husband and children, how do you, and we talked a little bit about this when we met earlier today, how do you factor in decisions that advance your career with the decisions that are part of being part of a family?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to, first of all, figure out where your priorities are. So a lot of this is about my career, but my priorities, in spite of all of this, have always been my family. So when you, and I'll give you a couple of very real examples there. Well, let me see. I'll give you one right now. So I mentioned that I was president of the American College of Rheumatology. The first time, two examples. The first time that I was asked to serve in that role was when my son Matthew was in 11th grade. And he was about to enter his senior year, and he was kind of having a challenging time. And I knew that being president of the American College of Rheumatology means that you're just not home. You're just not home. You're traveling all the time. And it was such an incredible honor to be called and said, hey, we voted, and this is what we want you to do. And I said, I just can't. I just can't do it this year. This is, because of my kid and what was going on, and I mean, it wasn't a difficult decision. It was difficult to communicate it, in a way that showed respect and everything else. And And I said, I explained that it was just timing. And 2 years later, they called me back. So, I was really lucky there. Let me see, what was the other example I was going to use? Early on in my career, I talked about the focus on research. My focus on building a research career. I had young kids, and everybody said, well, if you're going to have a research career, you got to be out there, you got to have visibility, you got to be, presenting your work and going to conferences. And my husband and I both decided that, with our kids so little, we didn't want to be out. we wanted to be home. So as much as possible. So there was and I explained this to somebody, so I apologize for repeating myself. There was the Mayo travel policy, which is really very lenient. They let you go all kinds of places, and they funded you, right? Because they wanted that visibility. Then there was our in-house travel policy, which is, you can be away one night a month, period. And so I didn't travel much at all in the first many years of my research career, because I wanted to be home, and neither did my husband. And the result, so yes, I was less well known out there in those first few years, but in fact, I was more productive than some of my colleagues because, when we finally put the kids to bed, I just sat and worked some more. I wasn't out in a Marriott somewhere or whatever. And so I tried to sort of compensate for that. And at the end of the day, I think actually it was perhaps a better trade-off than doing a lot of those conferences. The other thing that we did, my husband and I, we shared a lot, and in the first few years, again when our kids were little, it was very important to us, for one of us, to pick up the kids from school almost every day, because we learned, and those of you who are parents of kids know this, right? If you pick up your kid from school, the next 20 minutes, 40 minutes, you get all the school stories. If you're the parent who comes home 2 hours later, all the school stories are gone. Now he's off to something else, right? And so we both decided we were to go part-time, and so we both went part-time for, some number of years when the kids were little. I can't remember exactly how much, so that we could both do that. And one interesting little story, and then I'll be quiet and look for other questions. When I went part-time, because, I wanted to be part-time because my kids were little, everybody understood. When my husband asked for exactly the same thing, he kept being, the questions he got was, is Sherine all right? Is she ill? No, she's not ill. We're just sharing this responsibility. And it happened repeatedly, when he would tell people, oh, I can't do this. I'm off, it's my off day, or it's my early day, I'm part-time. Oh, is Sherine all right? It got annoying after a while. But so those are some of the ways we tried to balance things.
Mayo has a scholarship for recent residents or for fellow research residents and graduates to do other training.
Right.
It was a requirement, I'm assuming, to come back.
Yes, that was your payback.
How do you, in this era now of funding being flat and clinical revenue being so important, how do you get a CEO or CFO to understand the importance of perhaps providing?
Repeat the question. So I talked about what was called the Mayo Foundation Scholarship, which was a scholarship that could be received for people at the end of their fellowship or training who the institution wanted to come back on staff, to allow them to go get some additional training before they came back on staff, right? And the question was, how can we convince, current leadership, CEOs and whatnot, to fund something like this, given the, what's happening with research funding and what's happening with clinical margins these days. So it is more difficult. It wasn't necessarily easy then, but it is more difficult. And the only way to do it, the only way to talk to a CEO, I think, is ROI. It doesn't almost have to be a financial ROI, but they've got to see a return, and really all of us are that way, right? If you're going to spend money on something, you want something back. And so we need to be able to make the case that there is going to be a return on that investment, and invest judiciously and carefully. And that particular scholarship was, donor funded, and there were very few a year. I think it was one a year in a big institution with lots and lots of fellows and residents, or maybe a couple, but very few. And so it really is, it's harder and harder all the time, but it's making the case that these kinds of individuals, in 5 years and 10 years, are going to add value to the institution. They're going to, improve the brand. They're going to, do things that we need done. It's very challenging. I understand. Yeah.
Congratulations on your career.
Thank you.
I have the impression that we are in a crisis regarding the development of physician scientists. And with your career, you were a physician scientist, PhD. And what do you do? What is, how do you see your role, and what do you see that can be done in order to return to the possibilities that the development of physician scientists we had in the past?
So I think the key word that I'll push back on a little bit is return. So we probably can't return to the way we did it. And I know we didn't quite mention that, mean that quite that way. It's going to have to look different. Just like our clinical practice, our clinical delivery models have to look different. I mean, they just do. We can't sustain the current clinical delivery model. Our education models can't be the same. Remember, you're talking about flipped classrooms and, teaching the same curriculum at 5 different sites, or I don't know how many different sites you have where, so the education models are completely different. Likewise, I think the model for, advancing science has to change. And what does that mean? Maybe it means more public-private partnerships where you actually have the public sector or the private sector contribute in a more meaningful way to, advancing basic science, so that the government and the clinical institutions don't do it all. And so that's at least one approach that some groups are looking at, and there are some consortia, developing where you've got, private sector companies that at the end of the day really need the products, or at least the observations and the discoveries that come from the scientific community to move their products forward. And so to get them kind of in the tent to help build that foundation, I think that's important. I think it's starting to happen. I think it is starting to happen. So I've been at a couple of meetings where some of these consortia are being created, but it's challenging, right? Because their margins aren't getting bigger; they're getting smaller also. So it's the same sort of thing. It's trying to make an argument that for a return on that investment, and that return is like years down the line, and just like we're doing in the clinical practice, where we're holding people much more accountable for producing. I think we have to do that in education and research, and it's a cultural change. Right, and so I think, we have to hold ourselves accountable to sort of stepping up as well. So it's a challenging time, but it's happening across all of the missions in academic medicine.
Yes, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
And the question I have for you is, what do you see yourself doing 5 years down the line? Or what would you like to do?
Resting? I don't know. What I really would like is for one of my sons to have a grandkid. That's what I really would like. I can't, I'm totally invasive. I'm totally intrusive into their lives. my husband just, chastises me all the time. I guess I'm not exactly sure. Having said all those things, I can't, I won't pull out of, academic medicine altogether, for sure. I'm not sure. I look at folks for whom I have a lot of respect, who are maybe just a little bit older than me, and think, oh, that would be kind of interesting. I'll point to one individual. I hope she won't mind. But Claire Pomeroy, who some of you may know, but she was dean at UC Davis for many years. She's now president of the Lasker Foundation. You all probably know what the Lasker Foundation, and that is the coolest job. It is the coolest job because the foundation's already funded, so she doesn't have to do too much fundraising, but she gets to sort through and listen to all kinds of amazing science and be able to, to fund folks. And then she has an opportunity to do some other things. So I think something like that at some point. I'm not done with what I'm doing right now, but something, like that at some point would be great fun. Not that I would ever be qualified for the Lasker Foundation, but something analogous.
Any more questions? Alessia? You're never usually at a loss. Anyway, well, in honor of your coming today, we last week had there's a Women in Medicine organization that we have locally here at the University of Miami, and I'm proud to say that many of the faculty of the Department of Medicine were nominated for awards, and we had 6 winners from the Department of Medicine. So
terrific.
Congratulations to all of you.
Congratulations. Wonderful.
I think it's leaders like you who are inspirational, and we need to get the word out that it is possible to do all the things that you do, be successful, look so good at the same time. I mean, 5 years, I think, is underestimating the half-life of what's left. I think it's much longer than that. You should have many blessings to be continued success and health.
Okay, well,
and
thank
get
you.
grandkids, too.
Yeah.
You're the best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
So,
Thank
Arthur
you.
was, I was his chief resident. He was chairman of medicine at the University of Chicago before.
Yeah, how do I turn this off now? There's nothing.
No, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He was chairman of, he's still a close friend even today.